we've seen another chilling glimpse of what happens when a culture loses respect for life and replaces faith with rage. Democrat Attorney General candidate Jay Jones was exposed for vile, hate-filled texts wishing death and pain on Republican leaders. And when the Family Foundation Action Team told voters the truth about that, they received violent threats from actual voters. But there's good news, too. Another big win just came in from the Loudoun County boys case. We unpack what all these moments mean for our culture. Plus, we're excited to share Victoria Cobb's moving gala speech, a message of courage and unshakable hope that reminds us light does still break through the darkness and God still reigns. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candy Cushman. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you with us for Speak Up Virginia. You know, I just got to say right out of the gate here, it has been a whirlwind last few days. I mean, we had the news from the Loudoun boys case that we're going to share, and then things are still roiling over you just coming for 30 minutes lunchtime in Albemarle High School, and that's all still in an uproar. So there's a lot going on. And then in the middle of all that, we had the gala.
Yeah, no question. It's been a busy couple of weeks, but I think we got to talk about the election first because that's, to me, what is maybe the top story of that folks are paying attention to.
Yeah, I didn't even mention what's been in the headline for weeks now, and that is these vile texts that were unearthed. I guess it was an enterprising reporter from National Review that first broke this story.
Yeah, so, I mean, if folks probably are hearing pieces of this, I don't know if they've got the whole context, but I mean, I think the context is actually the most interesting part, maybe because of sort of my connection to it. But, you know, the interesting thing is this is a thing that happened several years ago. So this is not current. This was a couple years ago. But what's fascinating is we had a stalwart Democrat legislator die. And I just say that because he was one of the last remaining pro-life Democrats and was this awesome human being, actually, in so many ways. And so Joe Johnson dies, and the Republicans are giving nice speeches about him is the context of what these texts actually came out. And so the Republicans are actually saying nice things about Joe Johnson. And I don't know if Jay Jones just, I can't imagine what possessed him to react like this.
And I want to make clear, this is the current
Attorney General
for Attorney General facing off Jason Miyares.
Yeah, so Jay Jones is at that time a delegate, and he basically starts texting with another Republican, Carrie Coyner, who's, you know, another House member, and essentially he says, you know, I guess basically he starts out by saying, if those Republicans died before me, like if this context were later in life, you know, and something happened, he basically said, I wouldn't say all these nice, he was trying to say, I wouldn't say all these nice things, but he literally said, I would go to their funerals and urinate on their graves. On their graves. And she was a little shocked, I think, you know, like you
he's
see
talking about Republicans that are giving a
nice speech about a Democrat. That's the crazy thing. It's like in the moment of civility, he's actually,
if that were me, I would go and urinate on their graves. Is incredible.
So then she kind of says, you know, Jay Jones, like, come on, like, are you kidding me? And then he says, like, literally he says, 3 people, 2 bullets. Basically, if it were Todd Gilbert, who at that time was the speaker, you know, if it was him and 2 dictators, he'd get 2 of the 2 bullets. Like, I wouldn't shoot either of the dictators. I'd shoot him twice.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
He mentioned Hitler, which we keep seeing these comparisons to Nazis and Hitler.
Yeah, which is making the speaker apparently worse than Hitler. I mean, come on. I mean, that's unbelievable. And she's bothered by it.
Well, we're going to put this on the screen here so people can see. If we hadn't already put that on the screen, just want to make sure it's on here. You can see for yourself what the text exchange, and I guess this is a Republican. I mean, I don't know why he's texting this Republican. I guess she was considered more moderate.
I mean, there
or something.
are some friendships across the aisle. Very few left because people don't act civilly anymore. But there are occasionally these relationships. So obviously they had some kind of relationship enough that he felt comfortable expressing this to her, which is a little bit stunning. And she's obviously uncomfortable. And then they end up in a phone conversation about it, and it gets. You know,
he doubles down.
It gets worse. And he says, in the phone conversation, he basically says that he would like Delegate Gilbert's wife, who actually we all know because she was reported out at the Capitol. Mm-hmm. She's lovely. We've had her at our gala because she's a Capitol Hill, White House, you know, I mean, she's not working right now, but like, I mean, so everybody knows who she is. But he actually says he would like her child to die in her arms so that she would, quote, feel the pain, and he would change he'd feel the pain and you know, he'd change his policy position. That's a pretty unbelievable thing to say, especially He has two very adorable children.
Yes, it just breaks your heart because I saw the pictures circulating of the actual children. And when you see this statement, I wish her child would die in harm so she feels the pain and has to change. And you see that adorable child, that just kind of brings it home.
It's funny because I think as a mom, it's like, it's bad enough to say you would want to shoot somebody. But it's like he actually knows the worst pain somebody could experience is watching their own child die. Like, it actually is, like, to me, almost worse than saying put a bullet in somebody's head. Like, I know that sounds terrible, but, like, that is awful. So this is the situation we find ourselves in. And he has and we're putting that on the screen, too. Like, she's still texting after about that phone conversation. Yeah, it's clear that she's disturbed by it. And basically at some point, she shared this with House Republican leadership. And at some point years later, a journalist basically gets a hold of it. Now it's coming out. What you do in secret will see the light. 100%. And what's interesting is at first he didn't even quite apologize. His very first reaction wasn't even a super great apology. Let's just look at the text here that we've put on the screen. She says, you were talking about hoping that Jennifer Gilbert's children would die. And he doesn't even apologize there. He's very unapologetic. He's unapologetic there. He's saying, I've told you this before. Only when people feel pain personally. Right. What is wrong with him? Yep. He's taken it to a whole nother level. And it does show you sort of we have this culture where we casually, we've just gotten to a point where some people are so cavalier about human life and about things that are so awful. And it says a lot about him. It says a little bit about the culture that he's in and around and a part of. This is even, and I think worse is that he didn't fully. Initially his reaction wasn't a full response of apology. Then it was a lot more groveling, as it was clear politically this was not playing out well. But he still hasn't stepped out of the race. He doesn't think he's disqualified from running. I certainly don't want someone, just conceptually, the idea that someone views people this way and they're going to have the power of the law in the Attorney General's office. It's horrifying. Of all the positions, it scares me the most that this person would be sort of in charge of the law, is very loose to say. But we like to think that people's worldview don't have actual impact. But this shows you that ideas do have actual consequences, and they cause people to think certain ways that are dangerous. And we have to realize that. We have to have our eyes open and not be naive. And I think we just, in your heart, you want to get along with people. You don't want to think that ideas really are this polluting, but they are. And it's not Jay Jones. Here's the disturbing part. Tell us what happened with the action team, because we'd like to think it's just some extreme person like Jay Jones, but apparently it's not. Apparently this is pervasive. This is something that is spreading in our culture. Well, I think where we really saw even more sort of the next level of disturbing is that our Family Foundation action team that regularly texts voters to motivate them to vote. So basically we are reaching out to voters that might not be motivated to actually go to the polls and vote, but they probably, believe what we believe, or maybe even sometimes we're reaching, and in this case, we're reaching even to folks that maybe we would be considered swing voters, people who we don't know exactly where they stand, but this incident is so extreme. It's like, it seems like if we bring this to their attention, they're going to want to vote and pick somebody that is not going to be dangerous at the head of the Attorney General's office. So they send out a text to all these. So what you're saying is they're trying to send a text out to people that should be a little more open-minded. In this case, the softer ones, right? In this case, they were probably Democrats, but they were Democrats who have at least voted Republican at some point. They're supposed to be softer. Right, they're supposed to be softer. And what they got back, so they sent out a text that basically was alerting people to this situation with Jay Jones. And what they got back was horrifying. Who gets the fun job of reading these off? Well, the first one, thank God we need to kill more Nazis. So again with the Hitler Nazi analogies, which by now people, in no context is that ever a good analogy. Let's just call it right there. Don't use it for any reason. There's nothing that compares. Anyway, MAGA equals Nazis. That was another one using the Hitler Nazi thing again. Look at this one. Conservatives are inhuman cretins. Thus, they should be put down swiftly without remorse. Yeah, put down swiftly is a nice way of saying 2 bullets to the head. It's the same thing. They start with inhuman. You got to start there. Right. You're categorizing an entire group of people based on political affiliation or conservative views as inhuman. And then that's how we get then to put them down swiftly without remorse. We've seen this before in history. Yep. Very similar. I hope all Republicans die. They're ruining the country. If I could shoot them myself, I would. These are the kind of things that also, when you get to this point, our team, with a bunch of these had to kind of decide, are these threats? Are these dangerous? So then you get in interfacing with law enforcement. Like, do you think these need to be handled? I mean, what do
Yeah.
I mean, people should not be sort of issuing these kind of, I would shoot them myself. I mean, so basically you're saying if opportunity presented itself, you would actually, I mean, that's alarming.
The alarming part is that apparently it is not just one-off people, that we're getting a percentage of responses like that. And so that's what's alarming, almost this poison from this polluting worldview in our country right now.
Well, and it's consistent with what the polls are showing. So there's a lot of polling going on right now about the acceptability of political violence, and that has gone way up. It's gone up on both sides, to be fair, but it has gone way up. It is much higher on the liberal Democrat side. It is an alarming number of people think political violence is an acceptable methodology. And so our value of human life is so low, and politics as idolatry, as its own god, is so high for some people that those two things create a formula where all of a sudden you see texts like this and you worry that if this person, whoever, writes these kind of texts, or if Jay Jones, when they talk about conservatives worrying about lawfare and being sort of like, worried that we're being targeted from the legal field in a way that's unfair. But if you have a guy like Jay Jones who thinks all this and then is in charge of the law, that's where you get Letitia James and you get our friend Jason out in New York that we talked about one time in this podcast. There is a real thing where we should have concern that people are holding these views.
So what gives you hope for our nation then? Because it'd be really easy to be super discouraged right now.
Well, I'm hopeful because there's also this revival happening. I mean, we can't ignore, there is real change happening, both spiritually, which is sort of what I was just thinking about, is there's baptisms at these college campuses. I mean, there's some things going on with young people that have not happened in a long time. And then there's sort of a lot more folks coming towards the conservative political views, in which case, if we have enough of those people like Jay Jones don't get into office. So there's hope in a lot of directions, spiritual and just straight sort of political directions of where our nation is going. So I
like this report from our action team that they actually shared the gospel with someone while knocking doors.
Yes.
So which is why people want to silence the truth, because there is the gospel, like with Charlie Kirk, always sharing the gospel with people. Spiritually, there is a battle to silence that. And the way we combat that is to keep sharing more truth, keep sharing the gospel. Victoria, real quick, do you, I love the way you describe the clash there with what's happening, how it's combining to be the worst. Do you feel like there's another worldview behind that, or is that kind of just where that's coming from? Just the degrading of human life and making politics idolatry, or is there another worldview behind this dehumanizing?
There's nihilism. There's a lot of things going on at play. I heard a great discussion the other day about just sort of, when you have so much cognitive dissidence where things, where people just can't make sense of things because there is no truth, and it just, you end up in these terrible places, and I there's a lot of that
because they have no framework.
There's no framework. There's no
truth.
External truth. There's no
principles.
People aren't anchored. There's a lot of folks lacking nuclear families, so they don't even grow up with like those roots. There's just a lot at play that ends up where we are. But I do think this election, this situation with the text, has really sort of brought a spotlight into, are we going to keep going down this road? Are we okay with this? And unfortunately, I'm very alarmed that, nobody, there's been no elected official at the Virginia level saying he should step out of the race. On the Democrat side, like, no one will sort of say, like, this is bad enough. And that's because, in their minds, the politics is more important, right? They've got to hold the office and all this. But there should be a resounding condemnation. There should be, he should know he's now harmed himself to the point of not being fit for office.
Yeah, this is what happens when you don't have principles that are higher than power.
Right.
This is the kind of cycle we're going to get in. So I hope there will be people stepping up to put that ahead. But I think now is a good time to turn to the encouragement we were talking about. And this is this incredible speech that you gave to the gala. I know you don't really like talking about yourself, but it was an outstanding speech because it really helped us remember what's at stake right now. You shared a lot of bad news, and I think you had to, because you had to remind us what's at stake. But then you also gave us the hope there as well. So let's just listen to that. I won't make you... unless you want to say anything.
Analyze my own speech. No, that's okay.
Yeah, let's just go right into that. Oh, there was one thing. before we head in, I did want you to give us that good news about the Loudoun County.
Okay, yeah, we should hit that update real quick. Okay, so we are really excited. Our parents were back in court just this past week, and it was to, we had sort of a very temporary restraining order. Basically, we had a very temporary situation where it was like, okay, the kids' suspensions and records are not going to be impacted, but it only was until October 3rd, and so not October 3rd, 10th. So we went back into court, and our attorneys, America's First Legal and the Founding Freedoms Law Center together were able to argue that, in fact, we need an injunction throughout the rest of, basically, you need to hold the suspension and the records in abeyance all the way through until we get to.
All right, I'm going to have to slow you down real quick.
Conclusions.
All right, in abeyance.
Don't serve. We don't want to serve. We don't want the suspension served. We don't want the students' records touched on hold until we get all the way to final conclusion that these boys are actually guilty, because we think they're innocent. We think that they will ultimately be vindicated, and we don't want any of that. I mean, once you serve a suspension, it's hard to unring that bell, right? Like you've lost 10 days of education. And so the judge was, I think, very gracious in saying, that there's no harm to the school to hold that off. And so we were granted that injunction.
So this is at least the second significant victory, if not more, in the steps along the way with this case. And so the judge is saying, okay, you're not going to be able to put this suspension in place, which gives you reason to hope that there would be possibly a good outcome.
Well, and one of the things that is taken into consideration in preliminary injunctions is the likelihood of prevailing on a motion on the final conclusion. So in order to grant that, she had to say there's a decent likelihood that in the end these parents win. That doesn't mean she's saying they're going to win, right? Like facts come out and record gets exposed and there's lots of details and, you don't know what a court, we never predict what judges do. It's not a good idea. But it was encouraging to see that happen. So yes, big win on
all right,
the parents.
Keep praying for these boys.
I should mention one weird caveat that happened just because I think we ought to kind of enlighten our audience. The one piece that was a little bit odd and unexpected is that the judge also issued a bond for the costs of the county and their litigation. So essentially, the short version is they hired big fancy, DC firm kind of thing, and the judge sort of mentioned, I don't really love the taxpayers sort of being on the hook for all of this. And so she basically said there's going to be a bond that the parents have to get, so like an insurance against those fees. And so we have started, there is started now a GoFundMe. We, the Family Foundation, Founding Freedoms, as their lawyers, we can't actually pay it. It has to be the parents. So we've put forward a GoFundMe for the parents so that we can ensure that that a bond company will look at us and say there's enough funding to insure against this. And so it's a bizarre thing, but I think we should put the GoFundMe
we'll
up
at least
there.
Put it in
I'm sorry, it's not a GoFundMe, it's a GiveGo.
Okay, we'll at least put it in the description notes on our YouTube version of the podcast if you want to see how you can help out the families.
Yes, they could use the help.
But that is crazy. It does seem to me like posting bond to get out of jail, and that just doesn't seem right.
It's a weird application that was very unexpected, and we hope to resolve it. But until then, we really do need these boys to be able to, the parents to be able to raise enough funds. So
all right. Let's get back to our encouraging part where you encourage people that we do see more and more Charlies rising to speak truth. So without further ado, here is Victoria's gala speech. First time we've released it.
Thank you all. What an honor to lead this organization. What an honor that each one of you are here supporting the work that we do. We can't do it without you. So I get a lot of fanfare and I get a lot of recognition, but we have an incredible team, an incredible board, and you guys are amazing supporters. So we are so grateful. It's been said history is best understood in the rearview mirror, even while we are driving forward through it. In this moment, as we find ourselves grappling with the loss of Charlie Kirk, a brother in Christ murdered for sharing the gospel and the principles that it contains, it's nearly impossible to know what this all means for the future trajectory of our nation and our faith. What we do know is that efforts made by Charlie to transform the next generation into people who adopted the conservative worldview and understood its Judeo-Christian roots, those will have to be advanced by others now. What we don't know is whether his death will cultivate a sustained faith and action when the emotion of the moment fades. Selfishly, as Virginians, we pray that it makes an immediate impact at the ballot box. It would be fantastic if God chose to transform tragedy into triumph, and it energized a sleepy conservative electorate. This moment is critical as early voting has already begun, and we are a month away from the potential of relapsing into total liberal control like we endured in 2020 and 2021. As you saw from that video that Josh shared with you, it took us 5 years and brave plaintiffs to undo just one of the many abhorrent policies that were passed during that era. If leftists win in November, 2026 and 2027 will be even worse. How do we know this? Simple. They have a track record. We've seen what they will do when they obtain power. Were it not for the governor's veto pen, their insane ideas that they would have had enacted today would be horrifying. The Democrats' party candidate for lieutenant governor, Ghazala Hashmi, is the sponsor of the physician-assisted suicide bill, a bill that would put pressure on vulnerable people to take their own lives. And worse than that, she gave a speech about protecting abortionists who illegally send chemical abortion pills from Virginia into pro-life states. And she highlighted in a positive way the case of a New York doctor who sent pills into Louisiana to a Louisiana teen who took the life of her child under coercion. This is Hashmi's vision of Virginia, one that she's been declaring as she's been standing beside an upside-down American flag at rallies. Then there's the Democrat candidate for governor, Abigail Spanberger, who can't define a woman and who voted in Congress to not allow us to protect girls' sports, to allow boys to continue to dominate both in the sports and the locker rooms of our girls. Further, she's been caught saying that her activists should, quote, let the rage fuel them. Well, we know, obviously, her running mate, Jay Jones, has been a part of that for a long time and has plenty of rage fuel already being fueled him, as he was publicly outed for fantasizing in a text message to other people about putting 2 bullets in the head of our former Republican House Speaker and the death of his wife and adorable kids. The political left they tell the right all the time to tone down the rhetoric while using the very same breath to stoke agitation. Since her statement, 2 different culprits have been arrested with plans to kill House Republican members. Speaking of the House of Delegates, the crop of leftist candidates for that body is also horrifying, and it includes people like Elizabeth Guzman, who sponsored the bill that would allow Child Protective Services to remove children from their own parents if the parents didn't affirm their gender and support them mutilizing their own body. Oh, and if she doesn't scare you, don't forget about Joshua Cole, the non-binary black pastor who uses the Bible to justify abortion. These elections are must win. And when all is said and done, our more political organization, the Family Foundation Action, led by Bruce Schlesman, it's going to have spent $500,000 in targeted House races. They are knocking tens of thousands of doors, and they will send 700,000 texts that are get out the vote texts, and their commercials will have millions of impressions, all targeted at specifically the voters that we absolutely must have to win these House races. What's the cost of losing this election? If a pro-family majority does not gain control of the House of Delegates, we are facing abortion into the latest moments of pregnancy with 0 restrictions, even parental consent for a minor to receive an abortion, being on the ballot in November of 2026. If more than 38,000 babies' lives lost and more annually in our Commonwealth aren't horrific enough, the proposed constitutional amendment would etch into perpetuity the idea that you could have a right to elective abortion up until the moment of birth, provided by an abortionist who may or may not even have to be a doctor, for a young girl who doesn't have to involve her parents at all, And it would likely be in a facility that would have zero medical safety restrictions or standards. Now, maybe you've heard a little bit about Fairfax County School's social worker who has been caught transporting and funding at least 2 girls going to get an abortion. Thankfully, the federal government is investigating, and thankfully, 1 girl walked out the back door of the abortion clinic without undergoing that life-altering trauma. But the other, 5 months along, landed in the ER with post-surgical complications. Neither girl had parental consent, despite the fact that it is the law in Virginia. Would you help me thank the brave whistleblowing teacher, Zenaida Perez, who has brought this situation out into the public, who is here with us tonight. Zenaida, would you stand? If this scenario troubles you, and actually it might likely trouble your even pro-choice neighbor, imagine every school in Virginia having a contractual relationship with an abortion facility just down the road. Because guess what? That's the future that the left wants. That's the future Spanberger, Hashmi, Jay Jones, and the leftist House delegate candidates are fighting for. That, my friends, is the cost of losing this election. But there's more. Unsatisfied with children who don't get to have both a mom and a dad because of the prevalence of same-sex marriage in our Commonwealth, radical LGBT activists have advanced a change to our state constitution that would not merely enshrine same-sex marriage into it, but would also usher in transgender rights at the highest legal level possible. Such a change would render unconstitutional the newest regulations drafted and pushed by the Family Foundation's policy director, Dr. Todd Gackey, and some brave girl athletes that the Board of Health approved 14-0 in a unanimous decision, ensuring that boys do not play in girls' sports in our Commonwealth. You see, when a liberal-controlled legislature wouldn't even give our Save Girls sports bill a hearing, we didn't stop. We just did an end run around them. We simply keep going. Additionally, transgenderism in our Constitution would harm the boys that we're defending in Loudoun County. In case you haven't heard the story, our Founding Freedoms Law Center represents 3 boys who, in their sophomore year, were falsely labeled as sexual harassers simply because they bucked woke ideology and dared to complain that there would be a girl in the boys' bathroom and locker room. So far, it appears that Governor Glenn Youngkin, Attorney General Jason Miyares, and the Federal Department of Education all agree with our attorneys, Michael Sylvester and Josh Hetzler. And yet, Loudoun County administrators are maliciously targeting these boys because they didn't bend a knee to the radical gender ideology. Having exhausted all of our appeals in the school system, we now wait for the court of law to expunge their school records, to overturn their suspensions. Oh, and by the way, we'd like damages for ruining their high school reputations. The last thing that happens if we don't win this election is something insidious, but it's something that impacts every person in this room. It's the loss of freedom. Freedom to assemble, freedom to speak. That's the cost of losing. That's why it's so important that we win. In every single tiny place that a leftist has power, we see them use every ounce of it to advance extremism while shutting down all competing viewpoints or gatherings. Even in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, the left is still trying to silence every conservative that they can. They're terrified of any speech that they don't control, authorize, or approve. As 120,000 students raised their hand to start chapters, TPUSA chapters in their high schools and their colleges, the left is working in overdrive to stifle conservative thoughts and ideas. Recently, I was invited to address Western Albemarle High School's Turning Point chapter. The topic requested by the students was 2 genders, 1 truth. The moment the flyer was given to the principal, the event was immediately canceled, claiming it was too disruptive, and that the speaker, me, had mature content. With that, our Founding Freedoms Law Center stepped in, sprung into action, and forced the school to acquiesce and reschedule the event, as they had clearly demonstrated textbook version of viewpoint discrimination. See, they claimed my topic was the problem, but you can't say my topic's a problem and let the Gender and Sexuality Alliance meet every Friday at lunch on the exact same topic. Angry at a small free speech win, Albemarle School Board member Allison Vick Spillman pronounced on social media that as a, quote, proud parent of a trans child, I am livid. She then labeled my pending conversation about gender hate speech and declared that my speaking at their school, it was the moral equivalent to the KKK coming and speaking, and demanded I be canceled. Under tremendous public outrage and calls for her resignation, her damage control statement compared me to an anti-Semite or a racist. I mean, I've been canceled and picketed at my alma mater, University of Richmond, and I've been denied food service at a little restaurant called Metzger's down the road. So I guess the reality is I shouldn't be surprised. And I wish I could tell you that I expected that the left would tone down the rhetoric in the wake of Charlie's brutal murder and the 5 terrorist attacks, leftist terror attacks, in the last 3 weeks. But sadly, I can't. When a school board member calls me the KKK, calls high school students passionate about these issues the KKK, she knows what she's doing. She knows what she's saying. When the Augusta Free Press calls Noah, the boy who led our pledge, who's the president of the TPUSA chapter, when she calls them the future, when the Augusta Free Press calls them the future Neanderthals of America, they know that they are trying to get kids to self-silence themselves, to self-censor. But what the enemy intends for evil, God uses for good. It doesn't matter how many public school administrators, personnel, or angry leftists threaten me, call me a Nazi, or try to cancel me. I am walking into that school, and I'm going to tell the truth. Unvarnished, unapologetic. That's what Charlie would have wanted. And guess what? That's what Scripture commands when it tells us to contend for the faith. That's what the moment demands. One of the most impactful moments watching Charlie's funeral was when the Vice President, J.D. Vance, said, "We'll take it from here, Charlie." Charlie gave his life for God and country, and we owe it to him, but more than that, to our Creator to take it from here. All of us. Many think it's just me and my team that are standing on the front lines and taking the anger from the left. No. In fact, every day, brave activists who want to make a difference in their community are stepping up and speaking out. With Speak Up teams scattered all across the Commonwealth, ordinary moms and dads become courageous Charlies, like Kaylee, a Fairfax mom whose testimony at our state capitol Mama Bear Day went viral, reaching millions and helping dissolve a school committee that was pushing transgender ideology on children. And she's not alone. The Family Foundation teams, armed with Protect Every Kid tools, have won parental rights policies in over a dozen districts across the Commonwealth. And they've also demanded a safe zone for life to stop their town from becoming a destination for out-of-state abortion. If you're engaged in one of our Speak Up teams led by Candy Cushman, our Vice President for Grassroots. Would you please stand so we can thank you? Because we owe you a debt of gratitude. If you felt a stirring to do more, to speak more, to simply stand and be counted, reach out and join your Speak Up team. If not you, then who? Now is the moment to rise up. This year marks 40 years for the Family Foundation from our founding as an organization. And it seems it has never been more important than it is now to be involved. Our theme, Faithful Then, Fearless Now, took on new meaning when Charlie Kirk was killed. The Family Foundation has been faithful for 40 years, but now we must be fearless. It's up to us to take it from here. Nobody can be Charlie Kirk, but each one of us can strive to be a little bit each day, to have a little bit more civility like Charlie Kirk, to be as principled as Charlie Kirk, and to be as courageous as Charlie Kirk. Then we can, and we will, honor his legacy and our Lord by restoring and strengthening the American families for whom he gave his life. Nobody will be Charlie Kirk. There was only one. But every day, we can try. Thank you.
Wow, Victoria, that really was so powerful. And I should mention congratulations on reaching 25 years at the Family Foundation, and we got to honor that.
It was a fun night. It was really kind of everyone to do that.
It was a sober night because we were remembering Charlie, but it was also hopeful, remembering the legacy of the 25 years that you've been here and 40
years of the organization. I mean, that's a long time to be fighting the good fight, as it came long before I got here. So
you gave us a timely reminder of what's important, what's at stake in this election. But I have to say, one of my favorite moments was when you were talking about the controversy at the Albemarle High School, and you said, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to walk in there and share biblical truth. And that was one of my personal faves of the entire evening.
Well, I'm proud of those TPUSA kids that are pushing to do the right thing and, keep putting these issues in front of their peers. Yeah. So I love it.
Thank you for your courage. All right. Well, if you want to help support the Family Foundation, we don't say this a whole lot, but the gala is one of the premier times that we have to garner support for what we're doing the entire rest of the year with the legal cases that we've been talking about with the Loudoun County boys and everything we do. And if you want to help keep all of that going, you can at this time choose to donate. We're going to put an image of a banner you'll find on our website, familyfoundation.org. For those of you listening audio, just go to familyfoundation.org and look at the top where it shows you how to give on our website. And we appreciate all the support, whether it's of your time, volunteering, or resources. Thank you so much. We would not be here if it wasn't for all of your support over the last 40 years. And as we said at the gala, we were faithful then with all of your support, and we're going together be fearless now. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.